At midnight, the grandfather clock sang 12, while the victim was already dead. If the clock proved the suspect's innocence, why did the coroner's time disagree? On a rain-lashed New Year's Eve in 1976, the gilded mansard house loomed over Shoreline Drive like a monarch with secrets, its ballroom chandeliers throwing shards of champagne light across oil portraits and marble floors. Inside, a small party of six drifted between a string quartet in the great hearth, waiting for the stroke of midnight in the family patriarch's announcement. A ritual equal parts spectacle and dread. At the heart of it, James Paradine, a shipping magnate whose empire was larger than his heir's patience, a detail that would matter by morning. The grave announcement came early, during coffee and cordials. Paradine tapped his glass and, without a smile, said someone in the family had betrayed the business, that there would be terms for a private confession before midnight. He would wait in his study until the clock struck 12, door unlatched, blinds drawn, offering the guilty one a final hour to come clean. The room chilled despite the fire. On the mantel stood the house's pride, a 19th century long case clock, a quarter-chime beauty in inlaid walnut that rang out the household's milestones. It was set as ever by the radio time signal before dinner, precise, pompous, and, as it turned out, terribly convenient. At 11:05 p.m., the party splintered into alibis. The eldest daughter, Lydia, retreated to the conservatory for air, seen by the cellist tuning an A. The son-in-law, Charles, took a call in the library, he said, regarding a shipment delayed in Savannah. The nephew, Colin, claimed the pantry for a headache and returned with peppermint and damp cuffs. The housekeeper, Mrs. Webb, made the rounds collecting empty coupes, and Priscilla, the youngest, plucked a broken string from the quartet's second violin, laughing too loudly for the hour. The patriarch vanished into his study, alone with a ledger and the clock that ruled the house like a tyrant. When the long case chimed 12, the night unfolded on cue. 12 sonorous strikes carried through the corridors, a burst of cheers, a kiss or two, and then a scream, not staged but sharp. In the gray winter dawn, James Paradine lay broken on the terrace below his study window, rain stippling his hair. The French doors were locked from the inside. The mantel clock read 12 o'clock exactly, dignified as a judge. But the coroner's preliminary note suggested death around 11:40 p.m. Judged by body temperature and lividity, 20 minutes before midnight sang its alibi into the plaster. The paradox was as clean as the marble floors. If the clock proved he lived to midnight, how could biology insist he died before? This case would be called, in whispers, the clock strikes murder, and the most compelling suspect would have an alibi that kept resetting every quarter hour. Detective Helena Merritt walked the terrace while dawn peeled the night off the stone. No footprints on the wet balustrade beyond the victim's fall zone, no scuff on the sill, no ladder prints in the muddy beds. The study itself was a locked room cliché with modern teeth. French doors latched from inside, key present, window sash swollen and unmoved, a fireplace that last saw use at dinner. On the mantel, the long case's quarter chimes sang the passing of 15 minutes with smug regularity. Merritt palmed the pendulum's bob, steady even, unbothered by rain or grief. Pause and reflect. Clocks lie in fiction all the time. Smudged faces and accidental stoppages, pointing to a killer's preferred minute. Christie did it with smashed clocks and cunning watch shifts, where changing a reference time creates a false horizon for guilt. But this clock wasn't smashed, and the family swore it was verified against the radio signal at 7 p.m. That meant either science was wrong about the death window, or the house's beating heart had been made to sing late. First tension peak arrived in the breakfast room. Lydia produced the cellist, who vouched. She lingered in the conservatory from 11:10 to 11:55, visible behind steamed glass, sobbing softly while petting a ficus leaf raw. Charles, the son-in-law, showed a message slip from the operator. A 11:20 call from a Savannah agent, timed and logged. Mrs. Webb had pantry receipts, coffee refreshed at 11:30, lemon tarts at 11:45. Colin, red-eyed, admitted he wandered between pantry and billiard room. Thinking things through, everyone was accounted for near midnight, And crucially, the household heard the clock strike 12, a timestamp that seemed to absolve the one person who needed absolution most. Merritt interviewed Priscilla in the music room. The broken violin string, it snapped during a mazurka at 10:58, said the second violin, who sheepishly admitted he replaced it at 11:15. In those 17 minutes, Priscilla fluttered between guests and a mirror, applying lipstick, red on red. The quartet conductor remembered the long case's 11:45 quarter chime, arriving oddly late, but wrote it off to rain warbling the night. Oddly late, two words that make a detective lean in. Second tension peak hinged on biology. The county coroner's preliminary estimate, time of death approximately 11:40 p.m., was based on initial body temperature, ambient conditions, and early lividity patterns, always arranged not in absolute, but rarely off by 20 full minutes without interference. Interference like exposure to cold rain, accelerating cooling, or a window left cracked. Yet the study was shut tight and dry, and the terrace only gained the body after the fact. Paradine had injuries consistent with a fall, yes, but petechiae in the eyes suggested an interval of struggle before the plunge, something that demands minutes, not seconds. Merritt returned to the clock. If a killer wanted an unbreakable alibi, a timepiece could be weaponized. Advance it to ring midnight at 11:40, or retard it so that when midnight came, it reported 11:40 instead. But the family remembered toasts at 12 by their watches. The radio in the kitchen carried the New Year's ident, and still the house swore the long case chimed moments later, like an echo of time rather than its herald. Then she saw it. The quarter chime count at 12:15 was off by one phrase, a lilt missing, as if the train of hammers had been interrupted and resumed. In clock lore, changing the hands can desynchronize the strike in the quarters. A hasty adjustment can make a clock say one time while feel another. She removed the hooded dial and found faint brass dust near the snail and rack. Fresh. Someone had altered the strike train within the last 12 hours. A layperson could move the hands, but it takes a practiced nerve to nudge the strike control without stopping the pendulum. The killer hadn't smashed a face. They had taught the clock to lie in perfect sentences. Red herring number 1 was Charles's operator slip. In a stack on the library desk, Merritt found another slip from the same operator with the same number. This one time-stamped 11:05 and discarded. A practice call? Or a decoy placed to show Charles in the library at 11:20, away from the study? The operator confirmed both calls came through, but noted the 11:20 call lasted only 30 seconds before a click. Not much business gets done in half a minute. Red herring number 2 was Lydia's conservatory vigil. The cellist's view was through steamed panes, silhouettes all. Another woman in a long dress could have stood in for Lydia for a handful of minutes. The conservatory door had a second exit to the side lawn. Rain would erase the footfall of a person who slipped out, adjusted a clock, and slipped back in. But the timing window was razor thin, and Lydia's eyes were swollen for real. Grief, fear, or both. All alibis are claims of impossibility. I could not have been there then. And the best ones shift entire frameworks. Reset the clock, reset the crime. Detectives succeed by identifying which premise is false. The time, the place, the capability. In a mansion where everyone hears the same chime, the lie must be communal, embedded in the walls. The twist arrived not with a confession, but with a test. At 11:30 a.m., Merritt halted the clock, then advanced the minute hand 10 minutes without letting the train strike. She released the power, the quarter chime arrived late, then the hour strike lagged behind by 2 beats. It was the same stutter the conductor had noticed the night before. The long case was telling 2 stories at once, the indicated time on the dial and the memory of time in the strike. Someone had advanced the hands near 11:40 p.m., forcing the clock to strike midnight after the coroner's window, giving the illusion Paradine lived to hear it. That someone needed access and nerve. The study door was to remain unlatched for private confessions. The killer used that custom. The shelves next to the clock showed a smudge at shoulder height where a person steadied themselves. In the ashtray lay a broken peppermint wrapper, Colin's headache cure. And in the billiard room, Merritt found a towel with black grease along one edge, the kind a clock's rack tail would leave if tested with an oily finger. Colin's cuffs were damp not from rain, but from washing away brass dust. Confronted, Colin broke like glass and then reassembled into cold truth. Paradine had discovered an embezzlement. Small skims over years, 1,000 here, 2 there, to cover debts Colin hid from everyone. The old man summoned him an hour before midnight, offered terms that sounded like exile. Colin panicked, shoved, and there was a struggled minute where his hands learned a terrible language. Paradine went limp against the desk. Colin looked at the clock and saw a rope ladder. He set the hands forward, careful not to stop the pendulum, misaligning the strike to ring midnight, minutes after the fatal blow. Then he staged a locked room by latching the doors from the inside and easing Paradine over the terrace edge, a drop that would confuse timing and cause. When 12 arrived, it exonerated everyone present, especially him. Immediate aftermath was a study in cognitive surrender. The family had trusted the house and its rituals. The long case had announced births and wakes in the new year, and all it took to corrupt that trust was a nudge of brass and nerve. Lydia stared at the clock like it had called her by a false name. Charles folded his operator slips and slipped them into a pocket, chastened. Mrs. Webb, steady as granite, draped a cloth over the clock face until the horologist could come. In a final, bitter irony, the clock had to be stopped, its honesty restored by silence. Colin pled to manslaughter and obstruction, the plea structured around the staged timing and the manipulation of household fixtures, an offense as old as detective fiction, but devastating when carried out in a family home. The court's discussion touched on the reliability of forensic windows, the vulnerability of communal timekeepers, and the seduction of unbreakable alibis that collapse under mechanical scrutiny. In the years after, the long case was restored, its strike trains synchronized, its power cleaned of dust that once told on a killer. But the family never let it ring in the new year again. They listened to the radio instead, trusting a distant signal over their own walls. The moral question lingers. When belief anchors to ritual, midnight, a chime, a toast, how easily can a clever hand move time just enough to move guilt? And how often do communities trust the loudest signal, even when biology whispers otherwise?
Don't forget to subscribe to Real Mystery Reports for more strange, dark, and profoundly human stories. New true mysteries every day.